As many on Reddit and elsewhere have noted, we follow Corey Taylor pretty closely around here. You may recall Loudwire even changed their name to Knotwire on the day Slipknot released We Are Not Your Kind. Corey now has a solo album on the way, and he's joining us to talk about it this evening. But before we get into it, I got to know, what are your thoughts on that name change?
That was so funny, and I didn't know anything about it until somebody hit me up, and they were like, you need to go and look at Loudwire's page, and I was just losing it. I was like, that is such a great way to troll the trolls.
Yes.
It just made me so happy, and I was just like, yeah, you know what? People just take themselves way too seriously sometimes. They need to shove it up their ass.
All right, I'm glad you got a kick out of it.
Oh, I loved it. I thought it was great.
Agreed. I was going through your socials just to see what the latest is, and you have been way less active than you used to be. Social media addiction is a very real thing. Do you think you were at that level, and how do you feel now that you've eliminated that for the most part from your life?
Oh, I was definitely addicted to it. Absolutely. I mean, and I didn't realize it until I was trying to extricate myself from it, that I realized what a hold it had on me, man. I mean, it was pretty brutal, you know? I mean, and for somebody who prides himself and keeping himself clean and keeping himself aware, when I had that realization, it really bummed me out that I'd really kind of gone down this wormhole. Now, the circumstances why kind of lent itself to why I was so, kind of infatuated and stuck in that world. However, once I really kind of had that realization, it was time for me to step away. So I don't even run my socials anymore. I have someone who runs my Twitter and my Instagram, and I, once in a while I'll give them something to post, but they just basically do the stuff for me, and I stay away. And I got to be honest, it was probably the best thing I could have ever done, because it was getting really bad.
Wow. Okay. I didn't realize you weren't even running them at this point. Very cool. So
yeah.
So cruise ships and COVID-19 don't have a good history, right? The first ever Knotfest at Sea Festival was originally scheduled for August 2020, pushed back to August 2021, recently announced that it's been postponed for the foreseeable future. Why'd you go from pushing it up a year to where we are now? And do you still see a profitable future somewhere down the line for these festival-type cruises?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, right now is a blip. If you look at history, something like this hasn't happened for 100 years, and I don't see it really happening again for another 100. The larger problem is because nobody was at the goddamn wheel. Nobody took this seriously. And then because of our disregard for the sheer seriousness of this, the gravity of it, we were left with the country just in flames, the economy running amok. It just, whereas had we handled this correctly, we'd probably be coming out of the woods right now, or at least preparing for the second wave. So I do not think this is a portent of things to come. I feel like this is something that is a temporary reprieve from our normal way of life. We are going to adapt. We are going to assemble. We are going to move on. We are going to, all of us, hopefully take the vaccine that will help us all get through this, and then we'll be back to business as usual. That's what I think. But we have to slow our goddamn heels down and wait and do it right instead of trying to rush it because we all think we're smarter than scientists.
Speaking of handling it correctly, have you seen the if Slipknot can wear masks memes? And how do you feel about being brought into the conversation that is encouraging people to wear masks?
I mean, it was just a matter of time, It was just, as soon as the mask thing started, I was just like, oh, here we go. It just seems like every time something like that kind of hits the zeitgeist, our name gets brought up, which I'm pretty proud of, I keep looking at all these Karens and these people who just are having freakouts in Walmarts and Targets about wearing a mask. I just look at these people and I go, you bees. Get out of my face with that. I wear it for a living. You can't wear it for 10 seconds to go buy some produce.
Exactly. On a more serious note, what do you think of Kanye West running for president, but really more importantly, the world critiquing his mental health? It is so disturbing to see him trending for the last few nights and people just being cruel and insensitive.
Yeah. I mean, obviously people know that I've had my issues with Kanye for a long time, but I'm watching this now very closely. I mean, at first, I remember when he first announced this in that weird rant that he did on MTV when he was given a Thanks for Showing Up award. When he had first announced it then, I laughed. But then seeing this behavior that is happening right now, that worries me. You know, that's not the normal behavior of someone who is, that seems like someone who's having a mental break, to be honest. That sounds like someone who is like borderline. I don't want to say it's borderline personality disorder, but it almost feels bipolar. Mm-hmm. When you have a bigger sign like that and you exacerbate it with fame and money and all of these different things, people have a right to be concerned. You know, I mean, he's got a family. He's got people who, you know, care about him and worry about him. It's one thing to laugh about it from afar. It's another thing to watch a breakdown happening in real time, especially with someone who is loved by so many people and is actually, you know, a lot of his actions are taken very seriously. So when he says some of that shit, people take him seriously. It's like Trump. People take what he says very seriously, and that's a danger. So we have to be very, very careful and watch what's being said. I just hope that he gets the help that he needs. So let's put it that way.
All right, let's get into it. We know that you finished recording your solo debut album. So exciting. Tentatively due in September from what I'm reading. Tell me something about the upcoming record that you have not shared in previous interviews, whether that's about the process or the songs. Like, what gets you really excited to talk about?
I guess the thing that I'm most excited for people to hear is the energy and the excitement in the music. You know, this is probably the most alive album I've done in a long time. It's probably the most fun I've had making an album since the first Slipknot album, to be honest. It was so much fun getting to do this album with songs that I've been sitting on, some of these songs going back, you know, 20 plus years, and doing it with some of my best friends in the world. I mean, there's nothing that even comes close to that feeling. Going to work was an absolute joy. Playing the songs was an absolute joy. Watching them come together and hearing them back, we were all so stoked that that's what I want people to feel when they hear it for the first time. It's going to throw people for a loop because it is unlike anything I've ever done. However, it is the most fun album people are going to hear in all of 2020. It is that much fun. It's that much fun to listen to. It's that much fun to sing along to. And it's probably the biggest middle finger to all the haters in the world. I love it. And I think people are really going to enjoy it.
We could definitely all use a little fun. We already know that you learned piano, so you can create a song for your wife, which is so romantic. I'm sure she's loving that. Were there any other firsts for you on the record?
I mean, playing piano and singing home was pretty big. That was a pretty big first. This is the first time my name is in a producing credit for, like, officially. Like, I've done a lot of like co-producing in the past with the various projects that I've been attached to, but this is the first one where it was me and Jay Rustin, like, doing all of the production together. And he is just such a great partner to work with. We both were just on the same page. I played guitar on every song on the album, with the exception of Everybody Dies on My Birthday. And yeah, I mean, I knew exactly what I wanted to hear. I knew exactly what I wanted to feel. And then anything else after that was just extra. And it felt really good to collaborate with these guys. So there's a lot of firsts on this, but I think it's really the first time I've been able to wear so many of my influences on my sleeve and be able to show the world a deeper pocket where my love for music comes from.
You've shared that there are 13 original songs on the record. You also recorded several covers and acoustic versions of the originals. Where is all this extra material going?
Well, that's going to come out later. Probably some exclusive content with some releases that will happen. Just extra stuff. It's always good to have extra stuff. It always sucks when you look around and you're like, God, wish you could have an acoustic version of this or a really cool cover of this. we wanted to go above and beyond, or at least I did, and make sure that we had enough stuff to make sure that this release was really important. So at some point, all of this stuff will get released. I know we're talking about doing something on Record Store Day that could be really, really cool. But at some point, all of this stuff will be released. And we're talking about covers from everything from the Dead Boys to Eddie Money to John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band. I mean, we went deep with it, and it's really, really, really good. I can't wait for people to hear it.
The song that you wrote in high school, what could you possibly still connect with from your high school years? Like, what is that song about?
Well, that song is really just kind of just some prose that I had written down, like basically a poem. You know, it was kind of like an edgy poem that I wrote down. It was actually something that really kind of had a country connotation to it when I wrote it down. It was just basically about, you know, if I had to really sum it up, it would be, you know, just being young and wanting to run and get as far away from the place that you're in as you possibly can. You know, it's about meeting up with the devil basically giving you a choice, and you deciding that you're going to make the devil chase you to force you to make that choice. And that kind of fueled the music for it, that fueled the fire to kind of throw it together. And everybody who's heard it has compared it to a rockabilly version of Charlie Daniels. There's, you know, a really cool riff that feels like Pantera in it. That it's a really cool hybrid song that I really can't wait for people to hear. There's a little Thin Lizzy in there. It's badass.
You wrote the foreword to Nothing But a Good Time. It's an upcoming book about the hard rock music of the 80s. You're also appearing in an 80s sci-fi doc, In Search for Tomorrow. What was Corey Taylor like in the 80s? Like, what were you listening to, favorite movies, and how did that era influence the musician and artist you are today?
In the 80s, I was just a poor kid with chapped lips and a really bad haircut. Let's put it that way. I was just, you know, I mean, the 80s were when I went from elementary school to high school and basically kind of ran the gamut of everything that you could possibly go through. Being homeless as a kid, then ostensibly being homeless as a teenager, but then, you know, being strung out on drugs. I mean, the 80s were a tough time for Corey Taylor.
Yeah,
put it this way. Like the only good thing about the 80s to me was the entertainment. You know, the great music came out of the 80s. Really the seeds for who I was going to become started in the 80s, whether it was the movies that I was watching or the music I was listening to or the comics I was reading or, you know, the different groups I was hanging with, whether it was the goth kids or the punk kids or the metal kids or the skate kids. Like, I just kind of it really kind of formed the basis of who I am as a person because, you know, I'm very amiable and I get along with a lot of people, but I've always also just kind of walked my own path, man. You know, I've never followed anyone. I've never tried to join anything, and which is ironic. I mean, all the bands that I've ever been in, I was either asked to join or I started myself, you know. So it's one of those things where, you know, I've always been very comfortable doing my own thing. And if it includes other people, so be it. But if not, I'm kind of cool just being by myself, you know? And I think a lot of that started when I was a kid, growing up in the 80s and just really having nothing and having to get on, you know, figure out ways to entertain myself by having nothing.
Yeah. All right, we'll wrap on that note. A million thanks to Corey Mother Effin Taylor. We will keep you posted on all of his happenings as per usual, I know. And continued health and success to you and yours, Corey. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.